The Mets kicked off their 3-game homestand against the Oakland Athletics and a total of a 9-game homestand, if not 10 here, between the A's, then we have the Marlins, and then we wrap things up, sadly, with the Baltimore Orioles. And the Mets, after having their worst series of the season, there to end their 10-game road trip against the Mariners. Mind you, the Mariners got curb stomped by the Detroit Tigers today. Last time I checked, it was 15-1. Oh, I'm so glad to see that happen for the Mariners after the fact. The Mets get absolutely dismantled tonight. We all saw it, Mets fans. I got a lot to say. This is our latest WardyNYM Mets postgame segment presented by America's #1 sportsbook, BetUS. Check them out today by clicking the link down below in the description. That way you too get 125% bonus up on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. This game had so much to say. This game had so much happening, and yet the Mets honestly have me feeling even less encouraged about them to a degree heading into tomorrow's matchup. Were there any positives to take away from this? Yes, there is one that sticks out like a sore thumb that I'm going to get into here in today's show. It has to do with Pete Alonso. Outside that, however, very discouraging outing by the Mets with an offense where they went 4 for 16 with runners in scoring position. They left 10 on base and somehow, some way allowed the Oakland Athletics to pitch not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 innings of scoreless relief from their bullpen. You've got to be kidding me. Like, you actually had to be kidding me. This Mets team that have climbed so high from, again, being 11 games below 500 this season are now just 3 games above 500, or at least a game out of playoff spot, and that could be more if the Braves beat the Giants, which they may very well do so. They have the lead last time I checked. Things are not looking good in Mets land, folks, and now the big question that we have tonight is this a free-falling job by the Mets here? They're in a slide. Will they be able to snap out of this slide before it's too late, or is this the beginning of things turning downward, spiraling, if you will, for the Mets in the coming days throughout the remainder of the month? That is what we're going to deep dive in today's show. But everyone, first chiming in live on a replay, thank you all so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate that. The Mets lose this one in an embarrassing fashion at home. Paul Blackburn on the bump against his former team, and his former team made him look exactly like a guy where they knew his playbook. And I know Blackburn struggled with his command more than anything that we saw in the first inning, but afterwards, even going to the third when he got absolutely rocked by Shea Langeliers, I'm just praying Shea's family is at some point anywhere at all connected to the Mets and fandom. Otherwise, we got a guy named Shea, just like my newborn son. He's torching the Mets. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I really don't. The guy, I think, won 4 for 4 against the Mets in this one. This Mets team led by Paul Blackburn did not have it. We're going to get into Blackburn, what worked against him in this one versus what was working so well in his first 2 starts. His arsenal was not the same, was not as cutter reliant that we saw in his previous outings, and that definitely impacted him negatively in this one. Didn't have a comfortable feel for his pitches against a team that he knows better than most here in the Oakland Athletics, a team that he was just on less than a month ago. So Paul Blackburn gets absolutely rocked. The Mets have nothing to show for with runners in scoring position. Fans are calling for David Stearns' head because they believe that he did absolutely nothing at the trade deadline. When I will just preface this, everybody, I understand frustration to a degree with the bullpen, especially guys like Ryan Stanek, who has been less than ideal thus far. That's the reason why the Mets got him for what they got him in part. Let's bear that in mind. But with Jesse Winker as well, he's gotten a lot of flack, and I understand it to a degree, but we need to look at this team collectively right now, because this is not a one-man problem at the moment, because if that was, then we wouldn't have as much of a reaction as we do, knowing that, okay, the lineup's firing on all full cylinders, but Jesse Winker isn't hitting. Jesse Winker was one of the Mets' lone hitters to actually be productive today in this outing and driving a run in scoring position. Very few other Mets hitters were able to do that, not named Pete Alonso. So in today's show, I want to deep dive a bit on the numbers here. What is going wrong with this offense? JD Martinez exited tonight's game due to injury, taking a 100-mile-per-hour heater from the new call-up and Boyle, the towering right-hander that torched the Mets, at least early in this one, touching 99, 100 consistently on the gun. JDM gets a swollen elbow right away. He's out of the game with an elbow contusion. Mark Vientos, who was initially on the bench to begin today's game, ends up finding himself in the game just a couple innings into this one, not because of a piss-poor Jose Iglesias error at third base that we're going to get into, but more so because of JDM's injury. So fingers crossed JDM is okay, but folks, we have a lot to get into, not only on the unfortunate outing for the Mets here, but some key takeaways that we're going to break down to wrap up our live segment with the latest on the prospect ends. And I just realized today is Tuesday, so we will actually have some prospect updates to get into. We will break it all down as we typically do. Yes, would Would I have loved for the Mets to do more at the trade deadline? For sure. But given the prices, given the market, no one should be shocked that the Mets landed with what they landed. And no one should also be viewing Jesse Winker and these guys as if they were saving graces coming to the Mets, when at the end of the day, the only way the Mets make playoffs this year, the only way the Mets get to anywhere that they want to be is with the guys that have been here pretty much all season helping lead the charge. I love Francisco Alvarez. Alvarez is laboring plenty, that we know, with his continued shoulder issues, not hitting for power, that we know. The depth of this lineup, as deep as it is, again, when they go flat big time, as the Mets have quickly dropped 4 straight games in the snap of a finger and a blink of an eye, and now a team that was already north of 7, if not 8 games above 500, just 3 above right now, trying to climb their way back starting tomorrow. We got a lot to get into in this one, everybody, but I appreciate you all taking the time. We're going to break down everything on the pitching end. Paul Blackburn with a less than ideal outing. Again, that is an understatement here. On the hitting end, we're going to talk about how the Mets, again, had some hitting contribution, but very little when it mattered most, and that is why Pete Alonso's outing sticks out even better, because of the fact that he secured some runs when no one else was doing so. Scott, thank you so much for the holla. I appreciate that. Our season ended with Senga's calf. Within a true ace to stop the bleeding, what can we do? Chris Sale demonstrated that last night. No ace, no rain. We're going to get in. Granted, I mean, how many of us realistically think the Mets have a true shot of winning the World Series this year, even when they were riding their best with their rotation configuration to bullpen? Please enlighten me how many of you truly believe that. Let me know in the comments down below for people watching live on a replay. I never headed into this season thinking the Mets were going to go out and win it all. I never really think the Mets are going to win it all, because I would just love to see it, because I don't know what that feeling is even like. 2015 is the closest thing I've gone to my fandom. I don't know about you, if you've experienced 86 or not, but what I can tell you is that with the Mets this season, with their expectations, if we looked back at May, talking about the Mets right now, no fan would be complaining. It's just about the context of what's happened throughout this slide now. Every team has their ebbs and flows in the season, which is why I'm not going to sit here and scream my head off kind of like I have been recently. I'm going to take, a wider look, at a bigger lens with this one, and really getting into the issues with the Mets right now. How are they able to overcome them? Will they be able to overcome them? Scott, I appreciate that donation, but I do still firmly believe there's a path for the Mets to make playoffs without Kodai Senga for the rest of the regular season. It has a lot to do with what the Mets have done all year long without Kodai Senga. Thank you so much for the donation, AZ. I appreciate that. He says, a damn shame that I wasn't at the stadium here in this one. Let's see, I would have booed this team out of the effing building. It's damning that this game was over after the first inning. Pathetic. LGM, I need a pillow to scream into. I don't blame you whatsoever, AZ. Thank you so much for the donation. I greatly appreciate that. And I agree with you. I will say this. This was one of those games that was absolutely fluky in my opinion. And the reason why it was so fluky was simply because this was one of those outings that really felt like, for the Mets, even down early, when they were within reach of 3 runs multiple times, this felt like a game that they could have easily came back with. And the reason why that was is because they were putting the ball in play. They were getting on base. Again, 4 for 16 runners in scoring position, leaving 10 on base is nothing short of inexcusable. We all know that. AZ, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that. Yoshima, this poor schmuck, was at the game today, I believe. If so, I'm so sorry to hear that, Yoshima. Thank you so much for the donation. No less. Great memory. Says, it looks bleak right now, but it's not over. They're still in it. You got to believe. Stay positive. Again, I'm going to view this from all aspects, all lens in this one, because I think that's very important to break this down. But again, if there's any positives that I can give you folks, it is one, the Mets at absolute worst are going to be, 1.5, 2 games out of a playoff spot if the Braves win today. It could still be much worse. 2, this is a Mets team that had no chance whatsoever to be in the race of the wild card, and it wasn't all that long ago that we were discussing this. We need to appreciate what the Mets have not only done this season, while also properly critiquing them when they've now built up expectations and are meeting them. Both of those things can be true, and that is why in today's show we're going to break down exactly that. We're going to get into the game inning by inning as we always do. I'm going to kind of rapid fire it. I know a lot happened in this one, but again, especially after losses, I know that you guys aren't overly inclined to hear me break down the ball game for 20 plus minutes without, me going on tangents and things like that. I know it's not overly ideal, so I'm going to try to be quick with this one, but I do have some keynotes to get into before we wrap up the show on Eddie Rosario, who the Mets have officially signed from the Atlanta Braves. We did a video on that earlier in the channel. Check it out if you haven't already, folks, and let me know your biggest takeaway on the latest depth outfielder signing there. We have some key updates on Starling Marte, Kristen Scott, but some big ones on the Mets' ability to potentially pounce on the waiver wire. That is what we're going to break down towards the end of the live show, and that's what I'm going to clip and post it as a separate video earlier tomorrow. So only my live viewers and for people that watch this on replay within the first hour or two will have a chance to see that first before it's off the channel for at least, 10, 12 hours before I post it early tomorrow. All right, guys, let's get into it. Jacob, I appreciate you being here. Rebecca, great member. Scott, great member. How you doing? Steve, how you doing, my man? Thank you so much for shouting in. Both Steves. KC, how are you? Going up the list here. Goomba, great member. How are you, my man? Going up here. Jason, Joe, thank you guys all so much. Joanne, my man. Jason, David, West, great member as well. AJ, Chris, Retro, PA, thank you all so much for taking the time. Let me just make sure that we are properly set up here live on Twitter, and then we will continue on with the live show. Again, thank you all so much for the support here. Always means a lot. You have no idea that even after losses like this, I greatly appreciate everyone going out of their way to still chime in the channel and hear what we have to say. So again, thank you guys for the time, and now let's make sure we're all set up here. Almost done. I have one more thing that I got to do. Then your boy is ready to let this one rip, because like I said, there's a lot of breakdown, and again, I went through every emotion, I feel like, watching this ball game, with excitement, with displeasure to begin. There's some potential excitement, some fool's gold excitement, if you will, for, thinking that things were going to be better than ultimately what they were in the end of this one. Steve, great member, thank you so much in here. I appreciate that a lot. Exactly. Yeah, anyone calling Alvarez overrated isn't paying attention. He's been playing injury-riddled for quite some time now. Could he make the argument that, okay, maybe Terens should be getting more playing time? But in fairness, he is getting fairly decent playing time right now, Terens, in 3 or 4 game sets. Yoshima, thank you for the donation. I appreciate that. He says, also, side note, why am I not surprised a guy named Shea is a Met killer? I know, seriously. All we have to pray now is that my son doesn't grow up to be a Major League Baseball player for an opposing team, that we're going to have more deja vu of exactly that. I also had a blast besides the loss. Head still high, no less, brother. Awesome. Happy to have you in here. Thank you so much for the donation again, Yoshima. Wardy, surprisingly, there were a ton of people who bought the Grimace era Fool's Gold. Well, here's the thing. Again, just miss me with the nonsense on the Grimace era. Again, I got Grimace besides me. I can tell you right now that Grimace, the whole era thing, it was fun, but like anything else, it's just little things that we do as fans. We all know Grimace had nothing to do with anything. But what we do know is that the Mets, again, when they play to their potential this year, can be a very entertaining team. But it's a matter of how consistent can they be. And one thing that I preached so much when the Mets were riding high this season is that they need to make sure when they get back down to their lows, that their lows are not in the realm of what they were earlier this season. And to drop 4 consecutive games, I can understand the series sweep to the Mariners. It shouldn't have been as obnoxious and as embarrassing as it was, but I can understand losing a series at least to the Mariners. That makes a lot of sense. But to drop game 1 against the Oakland A's, who I understand have been playing some very strong baseball post All-Star break, they deserve credit for that, absolutely. Still doesn't change the fact that losing games like this, when you had endless opportunities to pounce, to take advantage, it wasn't one where you were shut down by the opposing pitching the entire time. The A's kept the Mets in this ball game the entire time, and instead they had their bullpen go 5 shutting, including Austin Adams, that absolutely no one remembers was a Met back in March other than Austin Adams, decided to do the OMG celebration after striking out Francisco Alvarez. So I'm glad Austin Adams has one highlight of his season playing for the godforsaken Oakland A's. Happy you got that in there, Austin. Now let's break down this ball game, shall we? And again, guys, thank you so much for the support there. Final donation, then I'll get to breaking down the ball game, because I always want to answer these donations as quick as I can. Chuck with the $10 holla says, sometimes I think to myself, I hope the Mets are I hope the Mets are ball bearers at my funeral so they can let me down one last time. You and Mama Wardy have some beer on me. We all need it. I appreciate that a lot. We will do exactly that next time we hit Citi Field, which will be this month. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully a victory when it happens. Thank you so much for the donation, Chuck. I appreciate that. And I love the wordplay there. Yeah, you know what, Mets, you've turned me down my entire year, my entire life. You have made anything that could have been enjoyable far from it. You might as well put the nail in the coffin, literally, and make sure that you're there when I pass. That is what Chuck is saying in the chat, and that is as diehard of a Mets fan as they come. All right, everybody, let go Padres. I don't give a shit about the Padres right now. And if you want to talk about Padres, go check out my Bleacher Report segment earlier today, bud, where I was actually glazing your buddy Jackson Merrill. Could be the ultimate jinx of the year. Maybe I had the Padres having a deep run. Maybe I purposely did that because I believe in jinxes. I guess you have to find out. Beat the Mets. It's funny considering the last time the Mets and the Padres matched up, the Mets curb stomped them like they were easy work. I'm really interested to see how either polar opposite that matchup is going to be by the end of the month, or how similar it may be again. Looking forward to it no less. But all right, guys, what is Nemo's excuse? Sore pinky? No, Nemo's excuse is that he just is completely lost at the plate post All-Star break. He's striking out at a ridiculous rate, and sadly, it is continuing. Let's see. Wardy, stop making excuses for players. Buddy, there's a difference between excuses and valid reasoning. Enlighten me on what I'm saying here that is on the excuse front. Again, you have to understand, players go through a lot every single day. I'd like to see you go ahead and do what they do. As someone that rips them a new ass the way that I do, it feels like fairly often when the Mets don't play their caliber, I can tell you that there is still a human element to the game, and there are a lot of factors that go into every single matchup that are far beyond what anyone can comprehend. It doesn't change the fact that it's inexcusable to drop this game the way that the Mets did. And this one, again, kicked off terribly for the Mets because Lawrence Butler for the A's, again, this is how out of touch I am with the Oakland A's. Most of the roster, I was enlightened as to who these guys were. I shouldn't say most, but I did not know who Lawrence Butler was all that well heading into this matchup, the same way that I didn't know all that much there with their second baseman and their third baseman and their shortstop. I know Andujar, I know JJ Bleday well during his time in Miami. I know Shaylane Lears because he was dealt, I believe, with Sean Murphy going the other way as a catcher deal with the Oakland A's with the, why am I saying the Oakland A's again? With the Atlanta Braves. Brent Rooker, know the story behind him as well. A Padres legend, right, Padres fans out there? Don't you miss Brent Rooker? I know I would. All right, guys, let's break it down. We have Lawrence Butler get on with a walk that we see in the first. Brent Rooker gets on with a single because, of course, he does. Paul Blackburn, we see picks off Lawrence Butler. It was a nice throw, though, that we see back to Lindor. Beautiful tag done that has just Rooker on first with one out. JJ Bleday gets a soft single, sadly, and Duhar flies out, and then Shea Langeliers gets on via hit by pitch. Shea, again, sadly not the Shea that we want to see succeed, not my son and not Shea Stadium. It's Shea Langeliers who single-handedly killed the Mets in this one, as Seth Brown again opens the floodgates. It is bases loaded for a Paul Blackburn, who's laboring early in this one, who does not have good control of the zone whatsoever, and he gives up a barrel of a double by Seth Brown, which clears the bases. It's 3-0 Oakland A's before the game felt like it even began. Then the Mets again kick off the bottom of the first by facing a flamethrowing right-hander that's touching 99-100 every single pitch. Lindor, Nimmo, Winker go down in order for a Mets lineup that starts today as follows. Lindor in leadoff, Nimmo second, Winker third, Alonso fourth, JDM fifth, McNeil sixth, Glacius seventh, Alvarez eighth, and Bader ninth. As we then head to the top of the second, we would see a 1-2-3 inning there from Paul Blackburn. And the bottom of the second, JD Martinez's day would already be done. He takes a 100-mile-per-hour heater right to the elbow. Hopefully, JD is okay. If we find out any updates on JDM, guys, on Twitter, please let me know. I greatly appreciate that. We will address them right away. But JD out of the game. Hopefully he'll be back with the Mets tomorrow, if not the following day. Martinez, who has not swung the bat well at all the past month, like he really hasn't swung the bat well. It's crazy that he still has RBIs almost at every other game rate over the past month for JDM, who has really been swing and miss that we know, but hasn't even been hitting well for contact, which is something that he otherwise is usually solid throughout his career, along with the opposite field power that he's famously known for. JDM is out of the ball game after that hit by pitch. McNeil gets on with a walk, and Mets have 2 on here with just 1 out in the bottom of the third, and Jose Iglesias gets the offense started with an opposite field RBI single. Oh my God. It's 3-1 Oakland, and trust me when I say OMG would go from a positive to a negative real fast with Jose, sadly. The Mets would go down from there as Alvarez and Bader do nothing. Alvy, who had some brutal at-bats today, and this was something I also mentioned earlier, everybody. I said this on Twitter. You know, I understood, and this was at the time of the Mets losing 9-4 in this ballgame, so it was a 5-run deficit. But even then, they had an opportunity to pounce with a couple on, with 2 out, and they allowed Francisco Alvarez to bat, and I was really struggling as to why that was. I know Alvarez is our franchise catcher. No one loves Alvy more than the guy right here. Literally, I have him on the wall behind me. I've had him on the wall behind me there for over 2 years already. I can tell you that as good as Alvarez is when he's right, we know that he's not right now. We know that he is struggling to hit for power because of the shoulder. It's really impacting his day-to-day play on the offensive end, and to a degree, what we have seen with his defensive ability. So, why not bring in Luis Torrens when you still have an opportunity to make this a ball game? All it takes is 1 more hit and runners in scoring position, and you're down by 3 or 4 runs. I know that's not ideal, but again, it could be so much worse than what it is. That was a moment where I was head scratching there. Maybe I was thinking too deep in this for the Mets that were essentially waving the white flag already, right? They're like, you know, if we're not going to hit with runners in scoring position pretty much all game to this point, why try to make further attempts to do it now? We scored a couple runs. That's enough for us. And that's where my frustration level was really peaking, was in that situation for the Mets, because it's like, Why? I don't get it. Terens is as good of a backup catcher as they get. At absolute worst, Terens doesn't hit well there, and that does it for the inning. I don't think Alvarez's confidence is wavered whatsoever if you pinch hit for him there, considering the Mets have went to Alvarez more often than not when he has been healthy this season and last season. We all know how good El Troll is when he's right. I don't understand why we're now acting like this is a guy that just, like, completely different. Like, on the offensive end, he's struggling right now. I get that. That's why I understand the pinch hitting. But for the people that think, he's completely washed up, also pay attention, look at it from a greater point of view, understand context behind situations. Trust me, it'll help you out a lot in life, especially when trying to evaluate the Mets if you don't want to be depressed every single day when they more often than not sadly don't have the success that we wish as fans. For a Mets team still 3 games above 500, they're trying to do damage, they do nothing else, and they're still losing 3-1. Brent Rooker, who has been a star for the A's all season long, rips a single. JJ Bleday, who was dealt for AJ Puck, in which I love that trade right away there for the Oakland A's, and I did not like that all that much for Miami. If that was what AJ Puck, maybe it was a separate trade. All I know is JJ Bleday, again, gets dealt from Miami where they don't know how to develop hitting, goes to the A's where they know how to develop players, and has success in doing so. He gets on with a walk, Rooker at second base, 2 on, no out. Miguel Andujar makes it 4-1 Mets, sadly, and this is all Jose Iglesias to blame. I love you, Jose. We all do. You have been a fantastic story this season. We all know that. But Jose Iglesias had a piss-poor play at third base. Again, getting the start over Mark Vientos to begin this one before we see Vientos then come in the game shortly after to start at DH for JDM due to injury. Jose trying to make a quick play, completely misses it, a big bobble, and that allows a run to score. And that is an example of Jose Iglesias. While he has great hands, sometimes he just gets a little too loose with it, and that's where it comes back to bite him in the ass. That was the latest example of exactly that. It's a 4-1 ball game now thanks to bad funnies by the Mets, and it is now completely blown open as Shea Langeliers, a fantastic hitting catcher that we have seen for the Oakland A's, a guy that I'm sure, honestly, the Atlanta Braves would love to have back. Him and William Contreras. Sean Murphy's awesome when he's healthy, but just think about the Atlanta Braves if they had a tandem right now of William Contreras and Shea Langeliers. I'm taking that and that future upside over Travis d'Arnaud and Sean Murphy every single day of the weekend on Sundays. But again, it's one of those things where you just don't realize until it's after the fact, after the deal happened. Shea hits his 22nd bomb of the year. It is 7-1 Oakland Athletics, and that is Paul Blackburn's day pretty much for the most part. He would pitch another inning or so, but just brutal work there. Langeliers, who again barrels all of that one, blows the door open. It's a 6-run deficit for the Mets, and we're just a couple innings into. Nimmo promptly strikes out because of course he does. He strikes out looking, which is even worse. Brandon Nimmo is someone who's prided himself so much on the strike zone, on making sure that he isn't beat by these opposing pitchers, but he has no confidence right now whatsoever. Again, Nimmo, for him to take strike 3 the way that he is, shows you how completely different his approach is. Problem, he needs to get back into the groove of how he will for Brandon. We have seen that with him, but you can't force it. And I think for the case of Brandon Nimmo, we're seeing a lot of force being done with his swings lately, and just an eye at the plate that is just a shell of what we have seen from Brandon throughout the vast majority of his career. Sadly, this was yet the latest example of him not looking like the Brandon Nimmo you're hoping for post All-Star break, post trade deadline. Jesse Winker with the single. Let's see. Alvarez just sucks when he tries to throw out base runners. The frustrating thing with Alvarez is that he has a tremendous arm. But yes, throwing out base runners has not been his strong suit this year that we saw last year. Again, there are some things that haven't went in Alvarez's way this year, as ailments absolutely play a factor. It has definitely hurt him trying to get in a groove while being that impact bat right away for the Mets in a 162 season. We all know how much he holds himself highly, and I assure you that no one is beating themselves up more than Alvarez when they're not going well. But he's a young player. He's got a lot to learn, and we all know how much he has potential to be a star here in Queens, and I firmly believe that nothing's wavering whatsoever. Miss me with the nonsense that the latest sample size is indicative on something that will be consistent. Far from it, in my humble opinion. Jesse Winker gets on with a single, so you got runners on the corners here in the bottom of the third, but Pete Alonso strikes out swinging, because of course he does. Mark Vientos pinch hits. He strikes out. I give Vientos the pass here, though. Again, he's coming off the bench. He's facing a flamethrower that gives him a slider that simply was not fun to face whatsoever, and that did it for the inning. We then head to the top of the fourth, where we would see some fantastic defense defensive plays in the outfield by Harrison Bader. We see Jeff McNeil with a great play to Rob Brent Rooker there to get the throw to Alonso, and that's a quick 1-2-3 inning there for Paul Blackburn, and this is Paul's final line, everybody. Blackburn, who posted a 1.5 ERA with the Mets throughout his first 2 starts this season, now posts 7 runs, 6 earned, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts, a 4.43 ERA, really skyrocketed with sub-4 after his last brilliant start. Paul Blackburn facing his former team was a recipe for disaster, and sadly that disaster was right from the beginning there against those Oakland A's. Let me know on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Paul Blackburn's outing today? Because for me personally, without even getting into the deep numbers or anything like that, this is a really rough one for Paul. Again, definitely one that he would like to have back. I'm giving Paul Blackburn a 2.5 to 3 out of 10 on the day. Really, really rough outing for him. Not one that I'm overly concerned about for him, but it definitely stings knowing that Mets pitching was absolutely in part their demise on this one, and it was a great collective effort between the pitching not getting the job done, Jose Butto not even being the guy that you expect him to be in the bullpen, having one of those rare rough outings for Butto, who hadn't pitched, mind you, since I believe August 7th, so it's pretty much been a week since Butto has pitched. I'm sure that maybe have one in hand a little bit of rust there against an Oakland A's team that's been hitting very well post All-Star break. Regardless, though, not an ideal day on the pitching end, but on the offensive end, when you leave 10 on base, and again, you strand how many runners in scoring position, 4 for 16, that too is inexcusable. So that is why this is truly a collective effort of a loss here by the Mets. This is not one of those things where I think Paul Blackburn is to completely blame. Yes, naturally putting your team in a 6-run deficit early hurts their chances of having any offensive upside, any rally going, any juice going, if you will. So yes, I can understand the frustration there, but too, the Mets had opportunities, and that is a difference maker. This is not one of those games where the Mets completely shut down after being down 4, 5, 6 runs. They had opportunities almost every single inning. They put themselves in said opportunities, so it wasn't like it was for a lack of effort in getting there, but the lack of effort that we saw at least was when it came to the production and actually executing with those runners in scoring position. All the more frustrated to see the Mets lose this game by a collective effort the way that they did too. At the end of the day, let's not forget, it's the Oakland A's. Yes. All right, guys, we head to the bottom of the 4th. Jeff McNeil gets on with a double, his 22nd of the season, and that's all she wrote. The Mets do nothing else there. Again, another inning, runner in scoring position, nothing to show. Shea Langeliers gets on with a single after a Miguel Andujar walk for Jose Butto, who comes in as a reliever there for Paul Blackburn, and we would see as the inning continues, thankfully, it would be a strikeout on Zach Geloff, and then it would be after it's reviewed, it would be held, overturned. We would see Durrell get on with a single, and then we would see there be a final out, though, thankfully, on everything else that was transpiring on that play. They reviewed it. Thankfully, he was still out. So that did it there as we then head to the bottom of the 5th. In the bottom of the 5th, Francisco Lindor continues to be that guy. He hits right away, leads things off as he has done brilliantly all season long since being put in that position. He gets his second hit off of Boyle today, and that does it. Not yet for Boyle, I should say, because a wild pitch then allows Lindor to get to second base. Brandon Nimmo, thankfully, with a big walk there, much better at bat than his first one we saw. Again, Nimmo, who didn't have much offensively today, at least if there was a lone bright spot, that was one of them. Jesse Winker, though, for all the Mets fans saying, why is Jesse Winker batting third? Jesse can't hit with runners in scoring position for squat. I understand Jesse has been underwhelming since he's arrived here in Queens, but guys also need transition periods. Yes, sadly, not every single time you acquire a player, they're not going to be flaming the way that Yoenis Cespedes was back in 2015. They're not all going to have that immediate spark. Jesse Winker, who has had one standout game with the Mets thus far, with a 3-hit game, including at least an RBI, we see today, again, when the Mets are down, he is producing, and that's important, because if you're saying, Wardy's producing, in garbage time, it's not garbage time when you're only halfway through the ball game or so, and you're trying to rally back. In order to win ball games when losing, believe it or not, folks, you have to rally. You have to get somewhere. Jesse Winker tries to kick this thing off with his 20th double of the year. It makes it 7-2 Mets in doing so, and that would work because Pete Alonso properly responds with the start of this rally brilliantly by taking a 99 heater up and drilling that bad boy for a 2-run shot. That would be a 2-run single, rather, for Pete Alonso, and that makes it a 7-4 ball game. The Mets are in this one. They're within the reach. It's only a 3-run deficit, and yet the Mets pitching came back to bite them in the ass right away. And this is how they did it, folks, because Vientos would get on with a walk. Again, we would see the Mets have themselves runners in scoring position. We would have 2 on with less than 2 out, and the Mets promptly go down from there as Austin Adams comes in to get the key 3 outs in McNeil striking out. and the pop out to Iglesias, and then striking out Alvarez, where he then famously did the OMG celebration like he thought he was hot shit for striking out, getting the Mets down 1-2-3 there in the order. Big guy for Austin Adams. I know that made his year. And for the Mets, again, they had 2 on, no outs here in the 5th. This is one of the many examples of what killed them this season. Just absolutely brutal. You're delusional if you think the Mets are making postseason. We're an actual joke. You know what? I will just say this for all the fans, I'm not saying here guaranteeing the Mets are making playoffs. Never said that heading into the season. I said the Mets will find themselves in postseason contention, but again, a lock to make playoffs is easier said than done. To all the fans out there, to all the fans that are saying that I knew this from the beginning, you are the same schmucks that said the Mets were not even going to get close to 500 when they were down 11 games below 500 back that we saw in the month of May. So miss me with the nonsense of the ones that say, oh, I told you so, all this and that. It's the ebbs and flows of 162. You will be the same fans that will not be talking should the Mets actually get on a run here and find themselves back in a playoff spot, which is very much a feasible option, very much a possibility and a reality that we could see in the coming days. All it takes is a couple losses for other teams, a couple wins for the Mets, and just like that, they're right back in the thick of this one. So that is what I need to leave you guys with, at least when we talk about the grand scheme of things. You can say the Mets season is over all you want, but I do not want to see your ass here should they actually turn things around and find themselves either in postseason contention or, again, just on the outside looking in, not for a lack of effort there. So that's what I have to say on that front. Now, to get back in this one, folks, as we continue to break it down, Mets need a rally cry. They do, Gabriel. They do. And you have to wonder, what is going to be the next rally for the Mets here? It's going to come. I firmly believe it's going to happen, but who's going to be the leader in that regard? That is what we're going to have to find out, hopefully starting tomorrow. But let's not get a rally. Let's just get a comfortable win over the A's. I mean, is that rocket scientist? Apparently for the Mets, it unfortunately is. They go down there. Again, Austin Adams, 1-2-3, and strands the 2 runners on base with no outs there. We then advance to the top of the 6th. Lawrence Butler gets on with a walk. Then we see there Mets would challenge the play. The call would be upheld. Rooker grounds into a force out. We would see the runner still there on first. J.J. Bleday gets on with his second walk of the day. And Miguel Andujar, of course, gets on with a single. The former Yankee turned Oakland A, having success this year in Oakland, rips a single to make it 8-4 that we would see for the Oakland Athletics. Frustration, to say the least, for a Mets team that, again, I understand it was a 3-run deficit, but a 3-run deficit is much better than a 4-run deficit. And a 4-run deficit is much better than a 5-run deficit, as Shea Langeliers, who already hit a 3-run towering shot that we saw to center right today, he rips a double, his 13th of the year. Shea Langeliers makes it 9-4, and that would be the nail in the coffin for the Mets in this one. They would lose by a final score 9-4. And just rapid fire briefly here on the offensive end, the continued struggles with this Mets team. I'm skipping the A's because they did nothing else in this one. Let's just talk about the Mets. Mark Vientos got on with a walk. Jose Iglesias got on with a walk. We had runners on the corners there with 2 outs for Alvarez, and this is where I want to see Terens pinch hit. I'm really curious as to why Mendoza chose not to do it there. Why not do it in that situation when you still have a chance to make this a lesser ball game of a deficit than what it was? Alvy flies out, and that does it for the 7th. We would see Phil Maton and Ryan Stanek have scoreless outings for the Mets today. Thank you guys for that. Appreciate it. Would have loved to see the scoreless outing from Stanek against the not Miami Marlins, but the Mariners. But I digress. Against his former team, instead of getting rocked the way that he did. Then we see Shea Langeliers rip his second double of the day in the 9th inning, his 14th of the year. Nothing else happens. Mets get a walk from Mark Vientos, so that's all she wrote, as Jeff McNeil strikes out for the final out in this ball game. Mets go on to lose again, folks, by a final score of, yes, 9-4, and they look back to get into the win column as soon as tomorrow. Let's see. Your angst is misplaced. You're angry at the Mets, so you're talking it out on the schmucks that said the Mets suck. No, not at all. Not at all. No, not at all. I'm calling out specifically the fans that I've endured all season long, that I endure every single year, that cry that the season is already over just a couple weeks into the year, and then come back big dick swing and acting like they've been here the whole time, acting like that they've been through the part of the ride, acting like been through hell and back with this Mets team the way that other diehard fans have. To those fans, to the casual, to the fair weather, that only chime in when things go right and otherwise just say, I want nothing to do with you, those are the ones that frustrate me the most, because I endure them every single day and have since I started covering the Mets. It is not an enjoyable thing, and it could definitely get stale pretty fast when you hear the same shit. Oh, Mets suck. Oh, Mets aren't making playoffs. Wow. It's almost like I've heard that every single day since the start of the season. Enlighten me with some new information that you have. If so, please, by all means, relay. Let's see. Only the Magic Conch can decide the season from now on. That's funny. That's, if you know, for my SpongeBob fans out there. If you know, you know everybody. Guys, we have plenty more to get into in this one, as we have a lot that I want to say. A bit on Paul Blackburn, on what didn't work right for him today, how this can be adjusted for his next start. On the offensive end, how the Mets need to approach things going forward, if there's any significant adjustments on the offensive end that can be had here, and ultimately, what are the latest updates in Mets land, from the key updates on the prospects to all the latest on not only the health of Starling Marte, Christian Scott, the signing of Eddie Rosario, but ultimately how the Mets have a chance to pounce and still acquire some good players before the end of the month. And we're going to break that down here shortly, and that'll be available to just my live viewers, my replay viewers. Again, that'll be posted separately as an individual video early tomorrow. If I had to guess, anywhere from 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, be on the lookout. 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's what we're going to aim for. All right, guys, let's get into this one. But before I break down a little bit more on the pitching, let's hear a quick word from our amazing sponsor of the channel that you guys know very well at BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
Appreciate you guys by clicking that link down below in the description in case you haven't already. And actually, guys, something I also want to mention to each and every one of you. This will not be beginning tonight because I put my foot down. This will officially on audio a year plus ago when I was with the previous network working with them, and I was doing work with my guys at Joe Serralo and Anthony Recker. Shout out to both of them. Hope they're doing great right now. But yes, everybody, all WardyNYM coverage, every single post game, every breaking news live show, every key video for the most part that is notable that can be transitioned into audio format is now going to be available on all your audio platforms. Yes, you heard that correctly. If you guys want to listen to me on your morning commute and back from work and say you don't have a chance to watch the video version on YouTube, now you have the shot to listen on Spotify, Apple, again, iHeartRadio, wherever you find your podcasts. I currently have the Spotify link available for you all in the description of the live show. If not, I will have it for you exactly in the comments right after that we are live here, folks. Yes, once the Mets get their first victory, we will have every post-game live show, every show that we typically do here on YouTube will be immediately uploaded on audio thereafter, so you guys will have the chance to pick which one you personally prefer. If you like audio, that's more your thing, perfectly fine. You can listen there. If you like video, if you like seeing me scream my head off or be really amped up about the Mets and showing all the visuals, then make sure you're watching here on YouTube. But again, greatly appreciate you all taking the time to check out the audio format that we're going to be unrolling in the coming days. But yes, WardyNYM will officially be on all audio platforms as soon as the Mets secure their first victory that we haven't seen yet. So next victory, if it's tomorrow, the following day, we will get that rolling. All right, guys. Now, let's talk a bit on Paul Blackburn today. What didn't work for Paul Blackburn? Well, it's a great question. Let's get into what was not working for Paul today. Frustration from the beginning. Again, this was a guy that was not commanding the zone well whatsoever. And something that we definitely notice is the following. Throughout his first 2 starts this season, Paul Blackburn has utilized his cutter roughly 34% of the time. His changeup, he's utilized 24% of the time. Roughly 18% on the slider, 13% on the sinker, 10% on the 4-seam, and roughly 2% on the curveball. Tonight, things were drastically different on the changeup more than anything that we saw. The cutter was down to 28%, but still utilized quite a bit. His cutter, he utilized a boatload his last start that we saw, I believe, against the Rockies, even a lot more than his first time, because the Mets want him to be a very cutter-heavy pitcher that has worked to his success. But something that did not work to his success today is that we saw the changeup usage. Dialed back half on his changeup usage there from 24 to 12% now in his third start. 17%, so right around the same there on the slider. But then we see on the sinker usage, heavier usage by 10% there at 23. On the 4-seam, this is where we have a bugaboo. He has a flat fastball that sits low 90s. I do not want Paul Blackburn throwing that even at a 16% rate the way that he did against the Oakland Athletics in this one. And a 4% on the curveball. He had to dip into his back pitches. Again, not the pitches that he otherwise wants to utilize right away. The cutter has been a great success for him throughout his young tenure with the Mets throughout his first 3 starts. Tonight, though, really struggled to locate with his command earlier in this ball game. Was giving up some big meatballs right down the pipe to guys like Shea Langeliers more than anyone else. That and Seth Brown really killed the Mets in this one. But ultimately, what was the big bugaboo for Paul Blackburn? 2 things. One, facing his former club that knows him best certainly doesn't help. Because while he can say, yes, I know these hitters better than most, those hitters can promptly say, I saw you how many times in BP, how many times in spring training. I know everything that you're throwing at me. I know exactly how you're going to work this one, even with your usage being a little bit different as of late. And then you add into the simple fact that, Paul Blackburn just didn't have it. This was just one of those days where he was roughed up early and was really just trying to find comfortability. That didn't happen all that often. I thought he was going to start again in a groove after the second inning. It was encouraging in 1, 2, 3. And then we saw there in the third, again, allowing the first couple to get on base. And then just absolutely the doors blown open there with the Shailene Lears home run. And that's where the Mets had their nail in the coffin. Again, that's why I'm giving Paul Blackburn here a 2.5 to 3 out of 10 on my rating today. And I don't know what you guys had in your respective ratings, but if you haven't dropped them in the live show in the comments down below, make sure you do so if you haven't already. And thank you so much in advance for doing exactly that. But that's the latest there on the Mets pitching. What we saw from Stanek, Maton, and Diaz, again, perfectly fine. Diaz gave up a double that we saw in the ninth, but that's all she wrote. He handled himself fine. He didn't get any of work there, even in a blowout loss like this. Edwin with 3.7 ERA on the year. Phil Maton sub 4. Stanek 5+ because he got absolutely killed by his former club, showcasing exactly why the Mariners salary dumped him in the first place, sadly. And Jose Butto with a rare rough outing, but I'm not buying stock in that. Jose Butto literally hasn't pitched in a week. You just need to get some innings there. Had to get worked early because of Blackburn only going 4. He will come back and he will bounce back from that one. I have the utmost confidence in that. But what I don't have the utmost confidence in is the Mets' consistency with this offense, because they have weapons. We've seen it all this year. We all know that. This is not a Mets team, however, that when it comes to finding consistency has been there all that much. It's really hurt them. And JD Martinez, who again I hope is not out with injury at all, that's the guy that has been laboring quite a bit for the most part. We have seen many guys in this lab just not produce nearly enough. And you want to know what has been the glaring problem with the Mets, with their offensive woes, post-trade deadline. Have you guys figured it out yet? If you haven't, let me enlighten you. And I know this might come off as a little surprising considering the towering one massive game that they had against the Rockies that can inflate numbers a little bit. Mets slugging has been down all around. That has been the big bugaboo. Alvey is not hitting for power. McNeil is still doing his doubles. We know that. Alonso, while he has had his stretches of brilliance, we know that for sure, definitely still has been Jekyll and Hyde. Alonso, mind you, Pete Alonso came in today's game with some of the worst numbers with runners in scoring position. That's why him hitting there, that 99 here down the pipe up, was massive that he finally got out in front of something with no outs, with a couple guys on base to drive them both in. I can count on my hand the amount of times that Pete Alonso has driven in runners in scoring position with multiple on with less than 2 out this season. No, I'm not joking. I can literally count it on my hand. Why is that a problem? Because it's Pete Alonso. That's the obvious one. Mark Vientos, while the power has still been there, the home run hitting, he has been quite a bit more swing and miss that we have noticed as of late over the past couple weeks for sure with Vientos to a degree. Jose Iglesias is always providing offense, so he's one of the few people that I really don't have much to nitpick about. Brandon Nimmo, though, has honestly been killing this team in various ways. Nimmo having the glaring hole that he has had on the offensive end, not even batting 150 that we've seen post All-Star break right now, with barely any RBIs. Literally, I can count on my hand the amount of RBIs that Brandon Nimmo has since the All-Star break. It's been brutal. It's been, 3 weeks now, if not more, that we've seen Brandon Nimmo just absolutely labor the way that he has right now, and that's where a lot of the problems have had, because when the Mets have tried to get things going with this offense early, with Lindor doing everything that he has been asked and called upon to do pretty much every time out there, when you have a rally killer right after him in Brandon Nimmo, you have a problem. So, all right, if we're going to go with the notion that Carlos Mendoza likes to work on the fly, he likes to make adjustments, I'm calling on you, Carlos. I love you, Mendy. Now is the time to make a decision. Now is the time to make a change. When you have Brandon Nimmo, who has not been able to hit the way that you need him to hit, we all know Brandon's going to get back to being Brandon. I'm not concerned about Brandon Nimmo when he's at his best, because when he's at his best, he's electric. He's leading the way for this Mets team. He's in a massive slump right now. Now is the time to move him down, considering you haven't already. Why aren't we doing this? Brandon Nimmo should be shifted down. Alonso, he's fluctuated with 4. He batted 5th yesterday, I believe. That didn't work. He batted 4th today. Again, Alonso's going to be batting 4th more often than not. Winker's batting 3rd. That we're seeing quite a bit just because of kind of that right fielder fit. I think the Mets want to have Starling Marte fairly high in the order potentially upon his arrival, which makes a lot of sense. And I think Starling Marte, with his contact hitting, should be firing on all full cylinders when he gets back. That's a guy that you want there in the 2 or the 3 hole. I would argue put Marte in the 2 hole, move Nimmo down to post 5. Move him down somewhere in the 6 to 9. I think makes a lot of sense right now with the way that he is not swinging the bat well, and not even taking the bat off his shoulders with some pitches that are really head scratching. Why is that happening? I understood they're facing a flamethrower, so he's dotting the corners for sure, but still, this is a Brandon Nimmo that we need to get more out of, and we need to make sure that we are not waiting too long before it's too late while just trying to get our guys out of ruts. You have to act fast in this wild card race with less than 50 games left this season. Move Brandon Nimmo down in the lineup. It is not going to hurt this team. It can only benefit them, Mendy. You have done pretty solid this season on, honestly, some of your lineup adjustments. Far more drastic than I think we've seen from managers in years past, where it does make a level of sense. And, you know, we have seen some lineups this season where we were initially saying, oh, this wouldn't make any sense. This isn't going to hit. And then they go out and hit, and they hit better than anyone else, right? And then we have the lineup that looks like the deepest on paper some nights, and they got nothing to show for it, like what we saw against the Mariners to a degree. So, point I'm trying to make here, everybody, Brandon Nimmo, move him down, especially when Marte returns. I do firmly believe that Marte will be returning as soon as this week. And before we get into Starling Marte and all the key updates there, let's wrap this up on the offensive end by rapid firing the offensive lows at the moment when we look at their collective numbers right now, and then we will get into our prospect reports as we always do. Again, everybody, your first time in live, and I'll replay the Mets will drop this one by a final score of 9-4. Look back to get into their winning ways and look to avoid just being now 2 games above 500 with a series loss tomorrow. Have to avoid that nonsense. 1,200, great member, 26 months. Sapucki would have moved himself down. Sapucki would have done everything for the Mets team by now. If you know, you know. Shout out to my Mets fans that know that inside joke that's been running on the channel for probably 2 years now at minimum, if not more. It's actually insane how long 1,200 and I have been doing this, and I love it. I really do. Until Thomas Sapucki retires, we're going to talk about Thomas Sapucki. If you know, you know. A Giants legend, right? Francisco Lindor, 2 for 4 with a double and a run scored. 262 average, 795 OPS. My leadoff hitter, my shortstop, and your shortstop. Brandon Nimmo, 0 for 4 with a run scored and a walk, a pair of strikeouts. A 227 average for Brandon and a 745 OPS. Brandon, I love you, but if we're going to have these drastic splits from the contact to the slugging and to the OPS, let's move your ass in the lineup right now because you're not doing it. You're just not doing it, and it makes sense to move him, especially upon Marte's arrival in the coming days that we're going to get into shortly. Winker, 2 for 5 with the double and the RBI, a 261 average, a 784 OPS. Other than Jesse being, you know, a guy that isn't going to hit ridiculous bombs, he is more of a contact hitter for sure at this point in his career that we're currently seeing. I'm fine as long as he's productive, and Winker was productive today, so I don't want to hear the nonsense that, oh, he's part of the problem. Again, guys, should the Mets have, say, traded for big home run hitters like a Randy Arozarena or Justin Turner? Turner wouldn't have happened, I mean, based on team fit alone. Randy I would have absolutely loved, but there's reasons as to why that clearly didn't happen, and Randy and the Mariners had connections way back in the offseason. So that was kind of like a foregone conclusion there. Especially with other teams, when you look at teams that have added bats at the trade line, not many teams added, you know, big productive bats that can really be an X factor for them. They are more, honestly, guys that can just kind of help round out their roster than anything. And again, you can't fault David Stearns and the Mets for looking at the Mets offensive production this season and saying, hey, we are confident in our core group. We would like to round out things, but we are confident in our guys to get the job done when they're firing all in full cylinders the way that they're supposed to. The problem for the Mets for the past month now, they are not firing on the cylinders that you need them to. And in a tight wildcard race, we have major problems. Winker, as I mentioned, 261 with a 784. Pete Alonso with the 2 RBIs, 3 strikeouts today for Pete, but did have an encouraging at bat there for sure. 240 average, 786 OPS. JD Martinez with a run scored, 257 average, 781 OPS. Mark Vientos 1 for 2 coming in with 2 walks and a strikeout, 272 average, 865 OPS. Jeff McNeil 1 for 4 with a double because of course he has a double. 3 strikeouts on the day for Jeff, though not a great one. Him and Alonso like 238 average, 679 OPS. Jose Iglesias 2 for 4 with a brutal error that costed the Mets a run at third base and an RBI himself, a 329 average and 853 OPS. Francisco Alvarez 0 for 4 with a strikeout at 257 average, a 728 OPS. Alvarez has quickly fallen from grace since post-All-Star break with his ailments that we have seen and just sadly not being in the groove that we wish he was. Bader 0 for 4, 266 average, 705 OPS, including a highlight reel catch that we saw there in center field. Let's get into 2 key things, then we're going to wrap up our live show, and it's going to first start with the latest on the prospect end, everybody. So let's check out what is happening in Mets land on the prospect end, and it starts there in Syracuse with the Mets as they had their first game of the week, basically, if you're not going to include Sunday, because they had an off day on Monday like every other minor league team. Now, I'm going to be frank, I did not know until just a couple months ago. The Mets got absolutely cooked there in Syracuse with Dominic Hamill. Love Dom. He was the Mets minor league pitcher of the year 2 years ago. Sadly, he has greatly fallen from grace since then. Hamill has joined other Mets starting pitchers where they have labored big time at the AAA level in Syracuse. Hamill, 4.2 innings, 9 hits, 6 earned runs, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, a 6.66 ERA. That isn't only bad, but that's unholy. I love you, Dom. Let's figure ourselves out, and let's hope we can get back to being a solid pitching prospect and not one that's kind of being quickly forgotten by certain Mets fans. Not that I'm one of them, but I know that Mets fans switch up on prospects fast. Sean Reed-Foley in relief today, not so great. Gave up a couple runs in 1.1 innings. He is still working his way back. This, I honestly thought was going to be his last outing before returning the Mets bullpen, but I am curious to see how the Mets respond to this, if the results matter to them in this one, or if they know that he's healthy, looking good to go with his arsenal, and they want him back in this pen as soon as possible. So Sean Reed-Foley, a guy that we can definitely expect to be back with the Mets at some point over the next week, barring any changes. Max Crank with a scoreless inning there. Crank, the dire Mets fan, looked good with a 3.26 ERA. And Tyler Zuber, who the Mets acquired that we saw back at the trade deadline, who started the year in any ball, flamethrowing right-hander, got some time with the Rays after looking great with the Long Island Ducks this year. He pitched a scoreless inning with a pair of strikeouts, a 2.8 ERA. Don't be shocked if Zuber is an arm that the Mets call upon, because I assure you, again, as flashy of a name that guys Ryan Stanek and Phil Maton are, I assure you that if either of them really shit the bed for the Mets down the stretch here consistently, David Stearns will cut ties with them. The same way that he will cut ties with Jake Diekman and all the other relievers this season. Because the bullpen is ever-changing. It is fickle. We know that. And we need to get outs. And that is what David Stearns is going to prioritize most. Do I expect Stanek and Maton to be cut? No. All I'm saying is, don't be surprised if we still see some fairly significant bullpen shakeup from now up until the end of the month, because there's valid reasoning as to why that could find itself happening. So that's latest there that we see for the Syracuse Mets to get cooked in their matchup. Now let's head over to Binghamton. Let's see what the Rumble Ponies had to offer in said matchup. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it in between? Let's find out here, everybody. And if you guys are watching live on a replay, thank you so much for taking the time today. Continue to smash that like and subscribe button. I greatly appreciate it. And again, really appreciate you all taking the time. The Mets lost this one in the 9th inning there, 5-2 to Portland. Now let's see on the offensive end what stood out, if anything, here for the Rumble Ponies. Let's look at Luis Angel Acuna. Let's look at others, and let's see what happened here. Okay, what we see, folks, Alex Ramirez 0 for 3, nothing there. Ryan Clifford, my man, 0 for 4, nothing to show there as well. Kevin Parada, nothing to show there. Yeah, a whole lot of nothing on the offensive end, actually. On the pitching end, okay, there we go. That's a solid start. I will take that. Shout out to my pitching contributor on the channel. Good friend Isaac Groffman has been gassing up Joander Suarez, who has been having a very solid year with the Rumble Ponies. 5.1 scoreless innings, allowed a unearned run, so scoreless in the sense of earned runs. 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, 3 hits. Suarez with a 3.99 ERA this year. Do not be surprised if he is an arm that the Mets dabble with next season. Grant Hartwig, as he continues to ramp up in rehab that we see with the Rumble Ponies, gave up 1 earned run, 2 hits allowed, 0 walks, and a strikeout, and 1.2 innings. Hartwig, who's been out with a period of time with injury, has had some nice outs for the Mets over the past year plus, and also has had some bad outings too. Just an arm that the Mets consider when they're desperate and need to call upon them. So that's the latest there on the Rumble Ponies. So now let's transition into the Cyclones. How did my man Nick Morabito do today? For those that don't know Nick Morabito, he is a leadoff hitter for Brooklyn this year, a top draft pick by the Mets over the past couple of years, an outfielder who hits for high contact that I'm a big fan of. I really like what he has to offer as a plate setter there to kick off the lineup there for the Cyclones. And he went 2 for 4 today. Let's go, Nick Morabito, baby. 286 average, 714 OPS, a true contact hitting center fielder who has some great range for sure, and a run scored. We see Weimer 1 for 4 with a run scored as well. On the offensive end, nothing else really notable there. And on the pitching end, huge outing though. Okay. Oh, is this? Okay, Jack Wenninger, I see you, baby. Jack, who was drafted in the 6th round by the Mets, the baby faced himself because he's just 22 years of age, born in 2002. My goodness, my God, my gracious. Jack, in his first year in the pros, baby, had himself a nice outing there for the Brooklyn Cyclones. 5 innings, 2 hits, 0 earned runs, 0 walks, 8 strikeouts for the young right-hander with a 2.84 ERA. Sign me the hell up. Ammons with 2 shoddy and 4 strikeouts. 2.2 scoreless innings, a walk, 4 strikeouts for Ammons, who is a awesome southpaw option that the Mets have that they drafted last year in the 10th round that my good friend Isaac Rothman actually broke down in our weekly prospect report that you guys can check out at the official WardyNYM Twitter account, which is at the WardyNYM, not my personal, which is just WardyNYM, the WardyNYM, with roughly 64,000 strong followers there. Check it out. We posted our thread yesterday, if not today, on the latest prospects over the past week. Ryan Ammons has looked fantastic as a southpaw relief option in-house for the Mets, and he went 2.2 shutty, no hits, no earned runs, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, a 1.42 ERA on the season. Ammons is a guy that we definitely could see impacting the Mets as a potential southpaw relief option and their bullpen as soon as next season, if not before the end of the year happens. So awesome stuff on the pitching. Not complaining there for the Cyclones. Really happy to see the pitching outings that we have seen across the board in the minor leagues. It's a damn shame that we haven't seen the same with the Mets. I mean, actually, we did Paul Blackburn and Dom Hamill. Might as well have a beer tonight because you both are giving up 6 earned runs. All right, now let's get into our last but not least before we get into our key updates here, folks, and that is going to be on the Port St. Lucie Mets. What did Colin Houck do? What did Colin Houck do? That is what I want to know. Colin Houck, for those that don't know, is Mets top draft pick from a year ago who's had a very underwhelming first year in pro ball. And because of that reason, I have been, a little critical of Colin this season, but I understand it's getting your feet wet. It's early going. Not going to freak out too much on this one. What's with the political ads? FYI, guys, any ads that happen, I have zero control in. If you get an ad on Kamala, if you get an ad on Trump, I am telling you right now, I am not endorsing anyone or anything like that. It's just nonsense that YouTube has to throw our way because it's election season and your boy is going to be making the dollars, obviously, through the ads as we always do on the channel. That's why we do this full time. The donations go a long way. Apologies in advance if you get offended by a political ad, but please know I do not place the political ads, nor do I have any control in what the actual content of the ad is when you guys come across it. Just bear that in mind. I am not one of those people. Port St. Lucie Mets won by a final score of 3-2, and then their victory, Colin Houck gave me a solid 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. Come on, today. Grupping, folks, because again, you're in everything's hectic in the world, no matter who wins, no matter what happens. But again, once more, and blame them if you're not happy with either Kamala, Trump, or whoever else that you might get an ad with. Again, out of my control there. I do not condone any of it. Oh, I froze. Oh, how fitting that I froze. I don't think I froze anymore. I think we're good, guys. Let me know in the chat, guys. As long as I didn't freeze, we will continue on with the live show so we can get on to our last but not least segment that I'm really looking forward to actually getting into this at least. I'm good? No, okay, we're good now? Awesome. That's a hilarious comment by Gria in the chat says, Wardy iced like Nemo looking at strike 3 called. I guess I froze and I was just staring into the abyss, didn't I? You did a bit look okay now? Okay, awesome. Yep, guys, just let me know right away in case yeah, Aiden, I think it's freezing for you still because you might be behind in the stream slightly. If your stream isn't actively live, then that could be the issue there. But all right, guys, let's get into our final segment. I'm going to post this separately tomorrow as a completely different segment, and this has all the latest to do with what we see with the latest big Mets updates here in Metsland. Let's get into this. I froze when I didn't take a side. Wow, fitting. YouTube's already trying to flag me because I'm not going to condone their political advocacy. How crazy is that? Color me surprised. Okay, now to get into this one, everybody, let's get into our big segment, then we'll wrap this up. Everybody, just fair warning to my live viewers, I am going to run my BetUS ad just a second because that way I'm going to post it then as an ad for our video that will be posted tomorrow. So just bear with it. It'll be another 30 seconds of the clip you saw earlier in the show. If you're seeing it for the first time, then make sure you listen up here. But let's get this rolling. All right, guys, let's continue to break down this. Actually, Actually, before I even do that, this for all my live viewers is where we're going to cut things off for people on replay. So let me know your biggest takeaway down below in the comments below. By the Mets faltering by a final score of 9-4. Greatly appreciate it as always, everybody. No matter your frustration or no matter your happiness somehow in Mets land, drop them all down below. Thank you all so much for watching. From all my live viewers, we're going to now continue on with our live segment and get into our separate portion here. To all my replay viewers, this is where we're going to be cutting things off.